My name is Jason Smith, and today I will be addressing my policy formulation topic, which is addressing the collateral consequences of imprisonment that create obstacles to successful reentry. For the purpose of this paper, we will be addressing the policies of the federal government. The idea of reentry is comprehensive. It includes all programs and activities geared towards ex-offenders successfully reintegrating into society. Research shows that two-thirds of the inmates released from prison will be rearrested within 3 years. Why is this a public problem? This is a public problem because the Federal Bureau of Prisons is a federal government entity. It receives funding annually by the approval of Congress. So, taxpayers' funds are used to pay the cost of incarceration while also being used to pay the cost of reentry fees. Causation: the lack of evidence-based programs, the lack of program accountability, and also the lack of complete funding for reentry initiatives and programs. While research has shown that programs addressing education, housing, and employment help reduce recidivism, there is still a lack of research on which programs specifically that address those needs are successful in preventing recidivism. There is a lack of research due to a lack of program accountability. Too often, there has not been checks and balances on the programs that note they offer programs to meet the needs of ex-offenders. Scope and severity. Who does it impact, and how big is this issue? The issue of successful reentry into society impacts the public as a whole. As previously mentioned, taxpayers are often the victims of the crimes and are also often the victims of having to fund incarceration and reentry programs for those crimes that were committed against them. Because it largely impacts the public, the communities, the victims, and law enforcement, the problem is huge. Research shows that up to 76.6% of released offenders with certain characteristics and criminal histories will return to prison. The agenda: to invest and increase funding for evidence-based programs that reduce recidivism for offenders, expand research on programming, which programs are effective and which are not, for example, education and work programs. Programs such as GED preparation, vocational training, and cognitive behavioral therapy have been shown to reduce recidivism. We need to find out which programs work, which do not, and stick with those. For example, comparing the long-term impact of educational programs versus purely punitive programs. The agenda: ongoing support and improvement, to implement program reviews to determine which reentry programs are meeting the goals of successful reentry, and to also allocate full funding that has already been approved. For example, the First Step Act authorized $75 million for 5 years. There should be a task force created that will review the programs that receive government fundings for reentry programs to determine their accuracy and usefulness. While laws may authorize funds, it is up to the Congress to allocate those funds during the passing of their annual budgets. While the First Step Act authorized $75 million for 5 years, much less of that money has been allocated by Congress each year. Solutions and alternatives. If additional funding isn't approved, funding from or for existing programs in the Federal Bureau of Prisons should be reviewed for reallocation. During formulation, policymakers must work within budget realities. If additional funding is unavailable, reallocation of existing Bureau of Prisons resources should be considered. Also, evidence-based recidivism programs can be added incrementally instead of all at once, lessening the impact. The conclusion: there are over 1 million people incarcerated in the United States. The public deserves to have returned to them well-adjusted ex-offenders who are prepared to become productive members of society. In order for this to be true, there must be reforms for an additional policy created for successful reentry.